Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm gonna talk about the season 3 premiere of The Wheel of Time. Great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So everything popped off in the White Tower because basically, I love Leandrin seemed like she was up to some BS. I thought it was interesting because I think the point was to make you think the red Sedai were on her side, but I think not all. I think some of them were playing either they thought the charges against Leandrin were actually legitimately thought was BS, or they actually were on her side and are actually Black Aja, that they are dark friends type of situation. So Leanne goes in there, tries to turn everything against Emily's seat by being like, well, she met with Moran, she met with Rand, and kind of let him do what he was supposed to do. And it's like, even though he's supposed to be bound here because that's what we're supposed to do, but she kind of let him do whatever. It's like, to be fair, she didn't fully do that. She tried to, but Moraine kind of put a stop to that last season. So but it's like, oh, don't get it twisted, Leandrin. We know your whole situation too. And it's like, we have a witness and it's Nynaeve. Like, oh yeah, I was kidnapped by Leandrin and sold to the Shanja. And Leandrin's like, cool, I guess there's no need for pretenses anymore. And it goes into full-blown battle. The ambulance seat tries to get rid of Leandrin, which I was immediately like, there's no way you're just going to straight up kill Leandrin. It feels like she's a crucial piece to all this, the role she's playing, that it's like, it feels like she's going to be sticking around a while. And despite everything, getting stabbed twice, almost getting her head decapitated. That was clutch. She almost got decapitated later on, but everything getting burned by the ambulance, just all that. And I love that. It's like, oh, you're so weary of the red Sedai outside, but it's like, oh, you should be concerned about there are members from each of the different colors of the Sedai that are dark friends. It's like, it makes sense because you would be the most suspicious of the red Sedais, which she's a part of, not realizing makes sense they've infiltrated so many other facets of the tower. I mean, was it Varian found out her friend, was it Nimol? Ended up being a traitor, stole some stuff from the vault of stuff of we can't let this fall into bad hands. So she got out there with at least one thing she needed, along with a few, because there were two things she went out of her way to grab. And so I don't know if there's some stuff she was specifically told to get, and then other stuff she made sure just to grab just in case, So things were bloody. There was one Aes Sedai, poor lady got literally sliced in half from separating her torso from her legs. You're like, Jesus. It got pretty brutal in there. There's a lot of death. And then we had that one red Sedai. There was 3 of them, but the other 2 got killed by others that showed up. And she stood with the others, Alana's 2 warders. That situation playing out the way it was. Because you knew, because I was curious, did Lan and Moraine know what was going to go down? To be fair, it's they can't really enter the tower, so it makes sense. All you can do is watch from a distance, no matter what's going on. But Moraine still does what she does and helps out, the ambulance seat later on. It's right, you do love her and you care about her, despite everything, your disagreements about everything, being banished from the tower. That was all orchestrated, but also you don't see eye to eye about things, especially about Rand. So it's a thing of, it doesn't get rid of all the love that's there. So when it's all said and done, though, like I said, I was surprised to see how close Leandrin almost came to getting decapitated, because both of Alana's warders went for that slice on both ends, and Leandrin made sure to go out swinging. When she left, she made sure to try and go for Alana. Both of her wards went to go protect her, and one sadly died. And it's just that sucks. Because it's and even the other being I can't feel him anymore. It's again, it's losing a limb. They are that connected, not just Alana and her warders, but the warders with each other, especially with just that whole menage a trois that was, their situation. So it's that sucks. And that's, once again, that's part of the job of being a warder. But so the White Tower is kind of a mess, because yes, you'd assume all the Black Aja that were like secretly there are gone, but you don't know who's secretly still there, who's going to stay behind to try and give some information out to any like dark friends and Black Aja that are out there. So it's like what do you do in that regard? Like it is a thing of like, who do you trust? Like there's so many people died, so many people ended up being traitors, and the few that are surviving, it's like you don't know if there's once again further traitors under your eyes. So now it's like our main crew has to decide what they're going to do, and Rand's being told by Moraine that he's supposed to go to a fortress to retrieve a sword. It's like a very special sword that can only be retrieved by the dragon, and it'll be something that can be used against the Forsaken, because they will be coming after him. And the moment they introduce the whole thing of, wherever we go together, I'm like, first and foremost, I know that's not going to happen. It is a sad thing of everything you went through from the beginning of the series to being separated and little pairings and groups, and you finally got back fully together in season 2, just for it to all blow up in your faces and you to be, having to be separated again. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but it's still kind of heartbreaking that it plays out that way. But from a storytelling perspective, you're like, it's going to be too much for all of you to be traveling together. You all need to go on your separate journeys, because Rand's got his path, and everyone's path is along that path too, I believe, but they've got their own roads that will eventually intersect with Rand's, I believe. The show I always think about is Stranger Things. I'm sure other shows probably have done it. I'm sure there were shows before Stranger Things that did it. I mean, I guess you'd be like, look at Lost. Like, there's a crap ton of characters who weren't always like around each other, who are all on their separate journey. But like, it's the one I think about the most is like Stranger Things. There's always plot reasons why they're not together, because it also makes the moment they are together and they finally culminate and come together, all the storylines, all the character storylines come together and kind of lead to the conclusions that they do and the culmination. So, but yeah, like every character, like in our introduction in this season, is still dealing with a lot. Perrin's still struggling with kind of losing himself. Killing that dude's father last season still sticks with him. But I think it also kind of comes down to like, Perrin losing himself and getting swept up in things and killing someone, because like, accidentally killed his wife in the beginning of the series. So I think a lot of that's still there, that fear of just losing yourself, kind of giving into like that other side of yourself. Egwene still deals with the was it Rana of it all. It's like that trauma and that fear is still there. And even being with Rand, it's not even Rand as the dragon that she's afraid of. It's just every time they touch, all she can remember is like Rena's touch, and it's just like that all that torture and pain she went through, like you don't just get over it, because it's been like, well, they talk about a month, but I guess that is saying like it's been a month since the season 2 finale. So I mean, once again, that pain and everything you went through, being subjugated and turned into a slave and like tortured and beaten and abused and forced to bend the knee to what they wanted you to be, treating you as less than human, like or a less like a lesser being, I should say, just because like obviously there's more than quote unquote humans in this world, so that's why I had to kind of amend that. We had Nynaeve struggling so much with, once again, the Archer situation of, as she puts it, what she remembers, and what struggling with accepting, especially because she's remembering her child, but it's like those memories are slowly fading away with enough time. And it's like, that's got to be heartbreaking too, because like you want to kind of let it go, but you also don't want to let it go because it was so real and it felt so real, and to kind of like wash that away and let those memories fade, I think probably it's like a second death. It's like for Nynaeve, I think, in a lot of ways. Plus she can't control her powers either, so it's like she feels like the big sister to this crew. She watches over them and takes care of them. It's like, as their wisdom, it's up to me to take care of them. That's kind of been my role since the old wisdom died. She talks about that later on with Matt. So it is a thing of, I'm not serving the role I could be and should be because I'm not strong enough in the regards of I can't control my power. Speaking of Matt, ever since he blew the horn, he's been drowning in, memories that aren't his. It's kind of like, I guess the moment he blew the horn, all those ghosts, all those warriors, like I guess it taps you into the dead and their like you become a conduit to all of them and everything. I don't think just the warrior, maybe it is just specifically the warriors he summoned, but it's like once you kind of open that doorway, it's there passing through you continuously until you shut it again. And maybe it's like once that door's open, there is no shutting it. You will forever be this conduit. It just becomes a matter of controlling it and finding a way to maybe, instead of having the faucet on full blast all the time, and using a sink as a metaphor, rather than having the faucet on full blast all the time, you learn how to like make it at least drizzle or drip out. If that's even a viable option. If you can't completely close like shut down the faucet, then at the very least you can at least control how much swirls through. It's to the point he's not sleeping. And Matt's always been like the overcompensator when it comes to like drinking and partying. It's just because he needs distractions from this. He already had to deal with that like season 1 and season 2 about like that dark blade calling out to him. So it's just like, and even Nynaeve brings up like, right, you hang on to the horn like a child, because, and I love that conversation of, yeah, like, I can't remember an exact wording, but it is this thing of like the difference between, medicine and poison. And it's like, it was such a beautiful point. Like, I think he had said Nynaeve always comes with like the medicine or poison, because it's like, I'm never quite sure. You want to treat it like it is medicine, like the horn, because it's like, well, I feels like I'm on a better path, but it's also been a poison in its own right. But Nynaeve says it's all about the dosage and having the wisdom and knowledge to kind of, discern how much makes it a medicine and how much makes it a poison. So that's going to be an interesting journey for Matt. But you also have Rand, obviously still struggling with, and not just many facets of being the dragon. You are the dragon, and it's like, right, it's out there now. You weren't fully the one that created the spectacle. It was more Rain doing it, but it's kind of like it's for the greater good. So, and even that drawing later on, and Rand's kind of like, how do I come to terms with this? They had this like mural, like someone drawing a mural, not mural, but it was like a drawing of Rand fighting Ishmael, and made it seem like it was like, oh yeah, this is Rand by himself, but it's like the fight didn't go that way. But it's like, it's like the hyperbole, it's going to like run rampant. I mean, that's the game of telephone and something like this. Oh, and that story is going to become more and more extravagant of what Rand accomplished and did. I mean, what he did was impressive, but if you notice that drawing, not a single other character is there. To be fair, Matt's in his own drawing, and so maybe the other group, whether it's Perrin, Nynaeve or Egwene, are all kind of getting their own separate drawings, but we mainly saw Matt and Rand, and specifically Rand in his fight with Ishmael. And as the dragon is kind of like being lauded, as kind of like you handled that on your own, which Rand's also got the concerns of the Aiel, and specifically Avienda, who is not too much of a fan of him, because she's watching over him and it's like, you are not the man who's supposed to lead us. You might have the blood in your veins, you might have the hair, but it doesn't change the fact that I don't view you as someone who is ready. And you have Elaine trying to be the middle maker for that, saying like, trust in Rand, like he can be that person. It's like the state of power that Rand has, it doesn't come easy to him. I mean, especially when he has himself as well as so many other people judging him and so afraid and ready to like, oh, men learning to channel is already bad enough because they eventually go mad. Now you're talking about one of the biggest, strongest male channelers, that being a dragon. Like, of course, like that's going to weigh heavy on Rand's mind. It always has. And now it's just like, it makes him even more scared and concerned because he's going to need his powers more and more. And the more you use it, the more you spiral out and, fall into losing yourself like previous dragons as well as other men who channel. but also being the leader of like, I don't know how to lead people, especially in like when it comes to like this great the final battle, and I'm going to be like leading the charge in that regard. So it's like I can't get Avienda on your side. Like if you can kind of convince her, it's kind of something Elaine's kind of bringing up. Like if you convince her, because it's like, right, you say she doesn't like you and doesn't really believe in you, but it's like if she really didn't care and believe, she wouldn't be here. She would have left. But the fact is, despite her disparaging remarks to you, she's still sticking around. So she does still believe in her duty. But that becomes a question of like, well, are you doing this because you do believe in Rand, or is it more of an obligation to your, well, duties? And that conversation is interesting too, because Varian has a conversation with Moraine about Rand, because Moraine still kind of treats it like I don't know if Rand's kind of ready. And Varen was kind of saying like, well, sadly her sister's situation is what it is. She brought up, like I said, I think the woman's name was Nimole. Like I saw her growing up and she ended up betraying me. It was making the whole point of now my sister's mind is broken. She was one of the smartest and greatest minds, and that mind is now shattered. I thought it was just like her memory was going because like the thing that was done to her, but it seems like just her mind is probably like a fractured mess right now. But she says like, I thought I knew a person's like character, like who they were, and I was proven wrong. The question is, you believe in the dragon, obviously, Moraine. The question is, do you believe in Rand? Because it comes up later on the conversation of the thing you fear the most about Rand is like those dark parts of himself that you don't like, that you try not to pay attention to. You want to bury those parts of Rand. You want Rand to be who you want him to be, but it's like Rand is the dragon. He has his own journey. You need to kind of just trust in him and his judgment, but Moraine isn't. I mean, Moraine, it's understandable. Like there's too much riding on this. She's put so much stock into this. This is her journey as well, to kind of be a guide and a helping hand, and she wants to nudge things in the way she wants them to be, but there's so much, Moraine's a control freak, and it's like understandably so, but it's like there's so much she can't control, but she does what she does to try and weave and swerve everything. Thought it was interesting that Lanfear showed up herself. The fact is, I was like, oh, you're going to go to Rand yourself, but it's like, no, she doesn't. She goes to Moraine and Lan, and she's saying like, right, Rand should go get that sword because she doesn't trust the Forsaken, as we saw with Mahiden. She doesn't like Lanfear, and Lanfear doesn't get along with the others because her and Ishmael are kind of on their own little island, because once again, she says, we are the only ones who kind of had a special relationship with the dragon, so we're a little more sympathetic, and yeah, we had our different goals about what we wanted from Rand. The others are kind of like, I don't care if he goes to the dark. If need be, we'll just kill him. Like, why even like put that up the chance? Him being a potential threat. So Lanfear is kind of like, yeah, it's in your best interest to work alongside me, but it is the thing of obviously the Forsaken don't trust her. How can we trust her? Because it's like, yeah, she's afraid of. She's going to basically arm Rand with the means that it takes to kill all the other Forsaken, but eventually she's always going to have the fear and concern that maybe Rand will turn his blade against her one day. So she's got to have some fail-safe, but it could also be like, despite everything, Rand still kind of talks about her back when she was Selene with some reverence, understandable. Because like him and Mad and Perrin were talking about like, oh, like what's going on between you and Egwene? Like not like you've kissed any other girl, and they're like, oh, really? He brings up Selene, and it's like, yeah, but you kind of dance around the fact is she doesn't exist. She was kind of a facsimile. She was really one of the Forsaken. You kind of danced around that subject and definitely wasn't going to touch that because you knew how that would sound. But I think there's also some level of part of you, because I mean, you can't just really just get rid of like caring about someone, especially when Rand was on his own and hiding out during season 2. Like that companionship and that connection meant the world to him, even though it was bullshit. But Lanfear would say like, no, it wasn't full bullshit, but it's also like, well, your connection with what was it, Lewin, the one of the previous, I don't think it was he the previous dragon, or was it like the dragon before the previous dragon? I think he was like the previous dragon, I believe. Once again, my memory of season 2 is a little foggy, so do correct me, do forgive me. I figured there was some bullshit going on when Moraine and Lon were just like sitting by while like everyone was going through some stuff. I'm like, yo, this seems weird. Like, I was like, it's got to be a trial. And I was like, was Moraine behind this? But it should have been in my head of like, oh, of course, Lanfear would be the one. It is kind of messed up. It's like Nynaeve is being attacked by this creature. Rand, there are multiple mirrored copies of him made that are attacking him and Egwene. I thought it would have been more of like who do you choose? Obviously, more and more fakes were coming up, but I thought like, well, they do look so identical and they're all trying to play you. So like, I thought she would have to kind of choose. And it's like, well, destroying the mirrors helped, mitigate some of that. You had Perrin having to deal with a flying axe, which obviously his trauma, both with his wife and the guy he killed, the father he killed last season, all stem from the axe. So it's like using those fears against him because it's like, whoa, what is it? What is Egwene's fear? It's like, Rand losing control and her having to put him down. Nynaeve's fear is kind of not being able to fight back. To be fair, that wasn't land fear. We find out that was like a gray man sent by one or the other Forsaken, most likely Mahiden, because we see her kind of making a gray at the end of the episode. And obviously that kind of got cut short because Lan stepped in. Luckily he did, because that wasn't part of Lanfear's situation. That was someone who just happenstance happened to operate at the same time. Like maybe they kind of had a feeling about what Lanfear was doing and they took advantage of it, or it's just kind of just shitty timing all around, where it's just like, oh, like it just happenstance of, oh, like it just ended up being the perfect cover, not because you orchestrated it that way. It just happened by happenstance sake. So, but also Rand's fear of losing himself, and he uses his powers to destroy the mirrors, and he's just kind of feeling it. And Egwene's kind of like Rand kind of let it go, and he does, but it's still that fear of like it could always go a certain way, and especially because it's like Egwene was hurt. Matt was so it caught in a trance of everything because he was asking Nynaeve for help earlier. And also the cards I thought was interesting because it's like one was someone with an arrow, and at first I was like, is that Egwene? There was someone with a staff. I was assuming that was Nynaeve. There was a person with the sword, but I was also like, could that looked like could have been a woman, but maybe it could have just been Lon. But I was like, especially because Lon had brought up the whole like sword thing, like his family sword, which I thought that was beautiful. Sad, but there was a beauty to it where he's just like, this sword belonged to my father, my father's father, and I left it behind. I've never used it because I've never figured myself to be worthy, because my home that I'm supposed to be, inheriting a crown for, it never feels like my home. Like here feels more like my home than there. But he's like, I'm taking the sword with me because I am weak, and the Forsaken will come after us, and I need some means of fighting back, because it's basically the same means as like the sword that Rand had that was special and everything too. So I was almost wondering if they were going to give that to Nynaeve to start wielding, and I thought maybe that'd be like this. It's a weird reference to make. Follow me on this. If you're familiar with Yu Yu Hakusho, they changed this in the live action, if I remember correctly, but I think they did it for a little bit, but they kind of got rid of it eventually. But like, it eventually happens. I'm diatribe. I'm going on this diatribe. I'm sorry. Like, I'm going to shut up and get to the point. Kuwabara had initially channeled his spirit sword through an object. It was kind of like a broken piece of like a wooden sword. But eventually, he learned how to just channel the sword on its own without having to use an object as its foundation. So I'm curious. I was wondering if the same thing was going to happen to Nynaeve, or she need like a weapon to kind of be that middleman, that intermediary that kind of act as kind of like the in-between between her and her power. That's what I was wondering, if it was going that direction. It didn't really go that direction. So circling back to Egwene really quickly, I wanted to talk about her going through the arches. And I thought that was interesting, like especially in the context of the episode. I mean, the arches being what they are, you never know what's real and what's not. That's the whole like mind fuck of the whole situation with Nynaeve last season, of how that orchestrates and how that operated. But her going in there because she needs the power. She needs it to be able to protect Rand and the others. And of course, like what it came down to is she's in the Emmeren's seat now, and she's got Elaine and Nynaeve by her side, and Rand has been controlled by the power. He's killed Matt and Perrin, and they have to put him down. We didn't see it, but we saw her come out covered in blood. Takes her acceptance into the White Tower and bounces. It's like, I'm not going to stick around. The tower is falling apart. I don't need to be here anymore. Now that I have this, I get to do what I want. Which is also ironic and interesting considering Moraine wanted Rand to go to Tyr to pick up the sword, right? But he's kind of like, I want to go home. But it's like, you don't get to do that. You're not some sniveling child. You are the dragon. You got to start acting like it. And I love that line where it's like, you don't tell me what to do. It's like, you can't tell me what to do anymore. And, it's like, true. But she can manipulate the situation to kind of force her hand once again to do what she wants you to do. But even that can only go so far, as we see where Rand decides to go at the end of the episode. But we'll get there. But also staying, like I said, with the Moraine of it all. It's like, yeah, going as far as manipulate, like she can be so, once again, she can skirt that line of those three oaths and stuff like that. But also it's just like she can be very manipulative because it is a thing of, it's that complicated nature of a protagonist where it's like, you understand why you're doing what you're doing. It's for the greater good. But even her and Lanfear had that whole conversation where it's like, you need to basically break up this group. And she's like, oh, you think I would do something so horrible to make them stay away from Rand? And Lanfear was like, yes. She's like, in fact, that aspect about you is the only thing I like about you, that Moraine will I will do something very duplicitous if it's for the greater good, if I believe it to be. But that also kind of gets into the narcissism of you believe you know best for everyone. And that's been an issue with Moraine. So she has been right in some regards, but she doesn't always handle things the best way either. But, I think the argument could also be like, well, that's not just a Moraine thing. That's some of Aes Sedai are a little more malleable than others. And I think in some capacities you can say Moraine is more malleable with like the mission and route she's going down, especially with the dragon of it all with Rand versus others, but she can still be very I can't really think of the word I'm looking for. She's very stubbornly steadfast in her beliefs sometimes. Like it feels like sometimes things aren't so black and white for her, but in other cases it does feel like it's super black and white to her. But like I said, that's more of an Aes Sedai issue, but it adds to this interesting like conundrum that is like an enigma that Moraine can kind of be at times. But either way, as I brought up previously at the earlier in the recording, that the group is splitting up. Matt is staying in. He's going to go to the White Tower with Nynaeve, or at least stay with her because she's the only means of like fixing himself and keeping himself under control. Nynaeve is going back to the tower because she needs to train to get stronger to be able to control her powers. Perrin plans on going back home. Loial is going with him, as well as two of the other like warriors. They're sticking with him, especially because Loial ended up I'm butchering his name. I always struggle with his name because I always like remembering in a proper pronunciation. Once again, is when sometimes my memory screws me over with certain names and pronunciations because I can see the name in my head sometimes, but I always forget. Whatever the case may be, the builder, as they refer to him as, like they kind of owe him. Well, one owes, and the other one's like, well, wherever she goes, I go. So they're going off on their own. And even Rand says, like, you don't have to apologize. My path isn't your path. But also, I believe this won't be the last time we see each other. Egwene, despite everything, it's like, no, I'm sticking with you. Forsaken or not. They want to come our way, they'll have to get through me. So she's sticking with him, and so is Avienda. And that culminates with Rand's decision to not go to Tyr. He's not going to go get the sword. He's going to go to the Aiel Waste. I think undertake the trials and get the Aiel army under. Like it's like if we're going to need an army, I need to start there because all the stuff that Avienda has kind of said to him has probably made him go like, right, that's the best option because getting the sword or not won't mean jack shit if I don't have an army. Like if I can get that army, and it's kind of what Elaine was kind of telling him to, like if he can get and build an army, and it's just the complicated nature of nothing is so simple when it comes to leadership, but it's kind of like you have to take kind of the good and the bad with it, and just kind of have to, it's like whatever choices you make, it will benefit and help others, but it will hurt others. And it's just like you have to make a choice and you have to stick with it. It's kind of what that comes down to. And so for him it's like, well, a sword won't mean jack shit if I don't have an army to lead. And that will be like this, like, because if he can get that strong foundation of the IO by his side, powerful warriors by his side, and people like who, if you could convince Avienda to be loyal to him by your side, there's a lot there. So obviously sad her and Elaine have to go their ways when stuff finally pops off between them. Elaine's biggest fear was like, she was like, oh, I'm gonna be lonely without Elaine, and not, I mean without Egwene and Nynaeve. Luckily Nynaeve's sticking around, so won't be so alone in that regard. But yeah, obviously it's not where Lan and Moraine thought they were going to go to the IO waste. Weren't expecting that twist. So it's going to be interesting to see, like, as the season progresses. I get the feeling like Moraine's going to have to deal with that more and more, of like having less and less sway over Rand, but for her, like, the concern of him falling further and further out of her reach, of kind of being able to push and nudge him in certain directions. I'm sure it would more so involve like whispering into Egwene's ear, just to kind of whisper into Rand's ear that way. I'm sure that's not lost on Moraine, but still, we'll see how that all shakes up and plays out. And in the very end, we have Makiden making her own gray. And she's like, oh, I need you to track someone down for me. I don't know if that's supposed to be Rand. Maybe it's Lanfear that she's tracking down. Who knows? Some very, very interesting developments in the first episode. This was another Prime Video 3-episode premiere, so 2 other episodes did drop. So I'm very interested to see where all of this ends up taking us. I avoided the season trailer. I avoided the thing at the end of the episode of this season on the Wheel of Time. I was like, no, I have no idea what to expect from this season. I'm excited to dive into it and see where this season's stories ultimately end up taking us. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.